All right, let's talk about intuitive machines. You've probably seen the headlines about their lunar landings, right? But what if I told you that's not even the main story anymore? Something huge is happening behind the scenes, and honestly, the market is only just starting to catch on. So let's dive in. So this is the big puzzle, right? It's a real paradox. On one side, you've got the company everyone knows, the one with the landers that, well, let's just say they've had a few bumpy landings. But then on the other side, this same company turns around and tells investors they're forecasting close to $1 billion in revenue. How on earth do those two things add up? That's exactly what we're going to break down. All right, section 1, the billion-dollar paradox. To really get what's going on, we first have to look at the old intuitive machines, before everything changed. Yeah, this quote from Forbes just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly sums up what most people think of when they hear the name intuitive machines. For the longest time, it was all about the landers. And look, they made history, no doubt about it. But the landings, they weren't exactly smooth. And that's the part that really stuck in the headlines.
And you know what? That perception wasn't wrong. It was based in reality. Their whole business model felt like it was built on one single thing: NASA's Commercial Lunar Payload Services, or CLPS program. Think about it. They were basically a super high-stakes FedEx to the moon. Every single launch was a white-knuckle experience, and the stock would either soar or crash based on whether the landing was a success. That was the game they were playing. That was the old intuitive machines.
Okay, but here's where the story takes a massive turn. We're moving beyond the lunar lander now, and this is probably the most important part of this whole story. I love this analogy because it makes it so clear. Imagine a taxi company, right? But their only route is to the top of Mount Everest. Super niche, incredibly risky, you get it. Now, what if that taxi company went out and bought the business that makes all the best gear, the high-tech vehicles, the climbing equipment, the communication systems? All of a sudden, they're not just a risky taxi service. They're the ones providing the essential infrastructure for everyone trying to get to the mountain. That's the pivot. They went from being a service to being the whole shebang. And this just lays it all out, plain and simple. Look at the before picture. Focus on lunar landings. Main customer is NASA, a niche service. Now look at the after. Focus on space infrastructure. Customers all over the place. Civil, commercial, even national security. And the model? It's not just a service anymore. They're a full-on vertically integrated manufacturer. We're not talking about a little pivot here. This is a complete top-to-bottom reinvention of the company. Okay, so now let's get to the numbers that really show what's happening. And seriously, brace yourself, because the contrast here is, well, it's pretty wild. Okay, so let's set the scene. In a recent quarter, they pulled in about $44.8 million in revenue. Now, that actually came in a little under what analysts were hoping for, mostly because of some government contract hiccups. So if you just looked at that number, you might think, okay, not great. But then you see this, a contracted backlog of almost $1 billion. And let's be super clear here. This isn't some hopeful projection or sales pipeline. This is locked in, signed on the dotted line work that they just need to do. That massive gap between the $44 million they just made and the $943 million they have lined up, that is the whole story right there. And this chart just puts it into perspective. Look at that. Last year, they did about $210 million. This year, they're guiding for somewhere around $950 million, maybe even $1 billion. That's almost a 5x jump in 1 year. So what happened? What lit the fuse on this rocket? It all comes down to one absolutely game-changing acquisition. The secret sauce here was buying a company called LUNR Space Systems. And this wasn't just some small tuck-in acquisition. No, they bought a major satellite maker that came with its own gigantic contracts. I mean, just one example. They have a deal to build 18 super advanced satellites for L3 Harris, a huge defense contractor. That one deal alone is a monster, and it instantly put Intuitive Machines on the map as a serious satellite manufacturer. So where does this all lead? Let's talk about the bull case. What's the argument for this company becoming an absolute powerhouse in the space industry? First off, the whole risk calculation has changed. I mean, look at this pie chart. It used to be basically 100% NASA. Now, it's a healthy mix, civil, commercial, and national security. They're not putting all their eggs in one basket anymore. This gives them a level of stability that the old, high-stress, did the lander make it model just couldn't provide. And the growth isn't coming from just one place anymore. You've got that massive backlog, which is like a guaranteed paycheck for the next year. You've got the steady nuts and bolts business of building satellites thanks to LUNR. They're still a top dog in NASA's lunar missions. They just won another $180 million for IM-5. And the really exciting part for the future, they're building a data network for the moon, which could be a source of high-margin, recurring revenue. I mean, come on. And all this is happening while NASA is basically saying, we want to land on the moon every single month. That's a huge tailwind pushing them forward.
Okay, so that's the rosy picture. But let's be real. Going from a $200 million company to a $1 billion one in a year is not a walk in the park. It's incredibly difficult. So now let's talk about the bear case. And it really all boils down to one word: execution.
Let's just look at the hard numbers. Right now, they are burning through cash, fast. We're talking a $33 million operating loss in one quarter, and they burned $56 million in cash over the whole year. Now, they do have a good amount of cash in the bank, around $272 million, but the clock is ticking. The big question is, can they ramp up their operations and actually start making money before that cash pile disappears? So you can almost picture it like they have to run this gauntlet, right? There are 3 big obstacles they have to get past. First, the next moon landing, IM-3, it has to go well. Even with all the new business, another tipped-over lander would just crush investor confidence. Second, they've got to make this LUNR acquisition work. You can't just slap 2 big companies together and hope for the best. Integrating everything is a huge, messy job. And third, as we said, they have to win the race against cash burn. They've got to turn that giant backlog into actual cash, and fast. Okay, so you've got this huge potential on one side and some very real risks on the other. So what should you be looking for from here on out? Let's map out the key things to watch. All right, here's your watch list for 2026. Sometime in Q2, we should hear about the Lunar Terrain Vehicle contract from NASA. If they win that, it's a huge deal. Then, later in the year, all eyes will be on the IM-3 mission. That's the big one, not just for the landing itself, but also because they're supposed to deploy their first satellite for that new data network. And of course, every single quarter, you're going to want to comb through their earnings reports. Look for any news on the LUNR integration, and the most critical number of all, how fast that backlog is turning into real, actual revenue. And that's really what it all boils down to, isn't it? Is this a new space titan being born, or a moonshot that's about to flame out? They've done the hard work of collecting all the pieces. They have the contracts, the tech, this new diversified business model. They have everything they need to become a cornerstone of the new lunar economy. But collecting the pieces is one thing. Putting them together is another. Now comes the really, really hard part: execution. The next year is going to be make or break. It'll show us if this is the birth of a new giant or just a spectacular firework that burned bright and fast.